Good day, everyone. We are the third group that were asked to present a lesson included in our subject. We are here to discuss about the Middle Ages art to realism art. But before we start, let us, the reporters, introduce ourselves. Middle Ages. As the term denotes, it is the period between the decline of the Roman Empire and the Renaissance. Since the church was the most important figure, the most important products of the early Middle Ages would have to be copied of the Christian scriptures. The printing press came later after the Middle Ages, so copies of the scriptures were done by hand. The art during the Middle Ages was different based on the location in Europe as well as the period of time. However, in general, Middle Age art can be divided up into three main periods and styles: Byzantine art, Romanesque art, and Gothic art. Much of the art in Europe during the Middle Ages was religious art with Catholic subjects and themes. The different types of art included painting, sculpture, metalwork, engraving, stained glass windows, and manuscripts. The end of the Middle Ages is often signaled by a great change in art with the start of the Renaissance period. Now, let's talk about the artists of the Middle Ages, starting with Donatello, an Italian sculptor known for his statues of David, Mary Magdalene, and the Madonna. Next is Giotto di Bondone, an Italian artist from the 13th century best known for his frescoes in Padua's Scrovegni Chapel. The next artist is Benvenuto di Giuseppe, also known as Cimabue. This Florentine artist was well known for his paintings and mosaics. And the last artist from the Middle Ages is Ambrogio Lorenzetti, an Italian painter of the Gothic movement. He is famous for his frescoes, the Allegory of Good Government and the Allegory of Bad Government.
Renaissance art. Following the Middle Ages, the Renaissance was a vigorous period of European cultural, artistic, political, and economic rebirth. The Renaissance, often defined as lasting from 14th to the 17th centuries, promoted the rediscovery of classical philosophy, literature, and art. The influence of humanism shifted the focus of some artworks during the Renaissance period to empower the individual. Most artwork emphasized naturalism, which was also an influence of humanism, since there was a great emphasis on the proportionality of the human body. Most artworks remain religious in its focus and themes. Renaissance art is often divided up into two periods. Early Renaissance 1400s to 1479, artists learned by trying to emulate classical artists focusing on symmetry and creating the perfect form. This era featured such artists as Giotto, Masaccio, and Donatello. High Renaissance 1475 to 1525, a rising interest in perspective and space gave the art even more realism. Great artists such as Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, and Raphael flourished during this period. Giotto di Bondone, Italian proto-Renaissance painter. Giotto inaugurated a new period in painting by fusing religious antiquity with the nascent concept of Renaissance humanism. His figures acquired an emotional intensity hitherto unseen in great art. Giotto is well renowned for his explorations of perspective and pictorial space, which gave his religious tales a fresh feeling of realism. Here are some of Giotto's artwork. Isaac blessing Jacob, 1290 to 1295. Crucifix, 1288 to 1289. Celebration of Christmas at Greccio, 1300s. Masaccio, Florentine painter. Masaccio is considered by many to be the first truly Renaissance painter. He adopted a rational approach that would come to define the Renaissance as a whole. Masaccio's life was tragically cut short but his exceptional achievements impacted the trajectory of Western art. Here's some of Masaccia's artwork: 1422 San Giovanelli Triptych, 1424-25 Madonna and Child with Saint Anne, 1425-27 Moment of the Tribute Money. Donatello, Italian sculptor. Donatello was one of the most influential Italian artists of the 15th century and forerunner of the Italian Renaissance. He pioneered new aesthetics in response to the flourishing Renaissance humanism movement of the time. Donatello's lifelike and intensely emotional works established him as one of Italy's most prominent artists. Here are some of Donatello's artwork: 1408-15 Saint John the Evangelist, 1415-17 Saint George, 1433 Vest of Niccolo da Ozzano.
Michelangelo Buonarroti, an Italian painter, sculptor, poet, and architect. He is considered to be one of the greatest artists of the Italian Renaissance period, even while acquiring a reputation for being temper-driven, fickle, and difficult. He was part of the revival of classical Greek and Roman art, yet his unique contributions went beyond mere mimicry of antiquity. His work was imbued with an astounding level of psychological intensity and emotional realism. So here's the artwork of Michelangelo's. The first one is Bacchus, the Roman god of wine, in a reeling pose suggestive of drunkenness, one of Michelangelo's earliest sculptures, created in Rome in 1496 to 1497. The second one is David. It is one of Michelangelo's most well-known works. The double life-size David, standing 13 feet and 5 inches tall, is depicted patiently waiting for battle, armed with a slingshot in one hand and a stone in the other. And the last one is the creation of Adam. Michelangelo painted this between 1508 and 1512. The fingers of God and Adam almost touch each other to represent the divine breath of life. This famous gesture depicts Adam's creation, with the greatest index finger poised to strike a spark in contact with Adam's hand. The second artist is Leonardo da Vinci, an Italian painter, designer, sculptor, inventor, scientist, architect, and engineer. The ethos of humanis prevailed throughout the Italian High Renaissance, in which artists were deeply rooted in the study of the humanities in order to continually improve themselves as world citizens. A person engrossed in the study and accomplishment of such differing hobbies was dubbed a Renaissance man, with Leonardo da Vinci serving as the term first prime exemplar. Despite the fact that his diverse personal interests led to his master of multiple professions, he is widely regarded as one of the greatest painters of all time. His lasting works continue to be studied and admired today. The first artwork is the Vitruvian Man, created by Leonardo da Vinci around the year 1485. The drawing attempted to illustrate the principles of Vitruvius, a Roman architect who described human body proportion in his book De Architectura. And the second artwork is The Last Supper, is one of the world's most famous paintings. This painting was created between 1494 and 1498 during the reign of Ludovico il Moro and depicts Jesus' last dinner with his disciples. And the last one, Mona Lisa. Around 1503, Leonardo da Vinci began painting the Mona Lisa. The painting represents what appears to be a typical portrait of a woman in which her wealth is not the primary thing on display. Raphael forged a common trait of painting during the height of the Italian High Renaissance, while only being alive for 37 prolific and passionate years. His genuine enthusiasm for life spilled out onto the canvas, where his mastery at conveying the Renaissance humanities era's ideas of beauty was astounding. He is considered an equal member of the Holy Trinity of master artists of his day, with Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. Raphael painted the Marriage of the Virgin in 1504, The painting represents Mary and Joseph's marriage ceremony. The Disputation of the Holy Sacrament, painted in 1501, it represents Christianity's victory over the multiple philosophical tendencies shown in the School of Athens fresco painted on the opposite wall. And School of Athens. It was painted between 1509 to 1511. The School of Athens represents all the greatest mathematicians, philosophers, and scientists from classical antiquity gathered together, sharing their ideas and learning from each other. Perspective of depth. It is most commonly used to describe the representation of three-dimensional objects or spaces in two-dimensional artworks. Perspective techniques are used by artists to create a realistic impression of depth, and they play with perspective to present dramatic or disorienting images. Revival of Roman theatrical plays, performed during special occasions at the courts of Italian princes, done in such a way that showcased grand and lavish entertainment for the audience. Aside from song and dance numbers, their interest in elaborate has greatly influenced their popular theater traditions.
Now, we will tackle about mannerism. Beginning in the 1520s and lasting until the early 17th century, mannerism was the dominant art form for the latter half of the 16th century. Mannerism painters augmented the natural world with elongated figures in asymmetrical compositions that projected tension and instability, in contrast to the idealized nature of High Renaissance art. Mannerism emerges more clearly as a link between the High Renaissance and the emotionally charged and dynamic Baroque art that followed today, when classicism no longer has a unique claim to perfection. Who are the artists of mannerism? The artists of mannerism are El Greco, Tintoretto, and Pontormo. First is El Greco. He is the man known as El Greco, was a Greek artist whose emotional style vividly expressed the passion of Counter-Reformation Spain. The Holy Trinity is a dramatic and evocative imagery portrayal of Jesus Christ ascending into heaven after his earthly journey. God, the Father, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit, symbolized by a dove, form a trinity. 6 bereaved angels keep watch over the body's revolt, while small cherub faces gather at his feet. The nobleman with his hand on his chest. This masterpiece of the Spanish Renaissance is one of the El Greco's best-known works. It is remarkable for its expressive gaze and naturalness of the gesture of the hand. Christ's blessing. This half-length representation of Jesus shows him looking directly forward, offering his blessing with his right hand and resting his left on a crystalline globe of the world. Second is Tintoretto. Jacopo Robusti is his real name, and he was an Italian Renaissance artist who specialized in religious, mythological, and portrait paintings. The Venetian's masterpieces are famous for their light, vibrant coloring, and dramatic composition, and he was a prolific artist over a long career. Self-portrait. Tintoretto painted this dramatically intimate self-portrait when he was 30 years old, at the start of his career, announcing the arrival of new talent on the Venetian art scene. The image follows the Venetian portraiture tradition of showing the subject's head emerging from a dark background and focusing attention on the eyes. The Miracle of the Slave. Tintoretto painted the first of a series of works for the Scuola Grande di San Marco in 1548, while Marco Episcopi, the artist's future father-in-law, was grand guardian of the school. The massive canvas depicts Saint Mark's miraculous appearance to save one of his devotees, a servant of a knight of Provenance, who had been sentenced to having his legs broken and his eyes removed for worshipping Saint Mark's relics against his master's will. Lastly is Pontormo. Pontormo was one of the most radical figures in Italian Renaissance art history, Although primarily known as a religious painter, he also received widespread acclaim for a number of perceptive portraits. Visitation of the Virgin and Saint Elizabeth. The young Virgin Mary greets the elderly Saint Elizabeth at the top of a steep urban street in Visitation of the Virgin and Saint Elizabeth. Florentine social protocol requires that a woman of importance not be out and about in a public unaccompanied. So each is accompanied by a handmaiden. The age difference between the two servants roughly corresponds to the age difference between the two saints. Joseph in Egypt. These 6 pictures by Pontormo and Bacchiacca paintings were parts of a larger series of panel paintings commissioned to commemorate Pier Francesco Borgerini's marriage to Margherita Acquaili in 1550. The series was used to decorate the couple bedroom in Florence's Borgherini Palace. Madonna with the Child and Saints. The Madonna and Child with Saints, also known as Pucci altarpiece, portrays the Virgin with Saint John and Evangelist Joseph holding the baby Jesus, the young Saint John, Saint Francis, and Saint James, the latter being the artist's self-portrait. This work shows clear references to classical figurative culture, although overall there is a definite break with the effects of harmony and equilibrium.
Good day, I am Dirk Harvey Bimo Cabalitaw, and today I will discuss to you all about the differences between the Baroque and the Rococo styles. But first, let me classify the two styles according to its movement. Baroque art's first works. When the Protestant Reformation began in the 16th century, the Catholic Church faced a number of criticisms, which led to the birth of the Baroque. The Vatican, the headquarters of the Catholic Church, saw in art a chance to rekindle a relationship with the populace, while the Rococo style began shortly after the Baroque, which was in France in the 1730s. The Baroque style comes from the word baroro, a Portuguese word meaning anything that is irregular, bizarre, or otherwise departing from the rules and proportion and principles established during the Renaissance. On the other hand, the name Rococo comes from the French word rocaille, which means tiny shells or pebbles. The art styles of Baroque style and Rococo style are very different. The Baroque artworks was more intense, heavier, masculine, and more serious, while the Rococo artworks was lighter, aesthetic, used pastel colors, and more feminine. Decorative materials including bronze, gilding plaster, marble, and stucco were utilized in Baroque architecture to create features like twisting columns and protruding cupolas. Baroque churches focus on fervent worship and church altars. The Rococo architecture focused more on symbols of sexual beauty, love stories, courtships, and mythology. There are art examples of Baroque art and Rococo art. First example is from the Baroque art at 1603 to 1604. Caravaggio painted the Entombment of Christ, one of his most beloved altarpieces. In some senses, that was the message of Christ, the coming of God to earth and the reconciliation of humanity with the cosmos. As per usual, Caravaggio always managed to ground himself, even in his most devoted works. Mary Magdalene is seen in the center, her face shaded as she dries her tears with a white handkerchief. The second example is from the Rococo art, an 18th century oil painting by Jean-Honoré Fragonard called The Swing. Often referred to as the happy accidents of the swing, it is most well-known pieces of art by Fragonard and is regarded as one of the greatest works of Rococo period.
I'm about to tell you about the artists in the Baroque period. Let's start with Antonio Lucio Vivaldi. He is a known Italian Baroque composer, virtuoso, violinist, teacher, impresario, and a Roman Catholic priest. His best-known piece was The Four Seasons. It is a set of 4 violin concerto composed in 1723. It is the world's most popular and recognized piece of the Baroque music. The four-violin concerto broke the new ground with their programmatic depiction of the changing season, their technical innovation. Next is the Arcangelo Corelli, an Italian violinist and a composer known chiefly for his influence on the development of the violin style and for his sonatas and his 12 concerti grossi. His instrumental work established a chamber music style and form of the late Baroque era. The trio sonatas of the Opus 1 and 3 were intended for such performance, with figure bass for organ, and those of Opus 2 and 4 were chamber music with harpsichord and or arculate accompaniment. Corelli's famous work was the Concerto Grosso or the Christmas Concerto. These concerti grossi were not published until the year of his death. This piece is commonly called the Christmas Concerto because it may have been performed by Corelli on Christmas Eve in 1690. The title page bears inscription Fatto per la notte di Natale, means it's made for the night of the Christmas. Next is the Claudio Giovanni Antonio Monteverdi, the most important developer of the new genre, the opera. He also did much to bring a modern secular spirit to church music. He was an Italian composer, string player, choir master, and priest in the late Renaissance. The most famous work from his Mantuan period are the opera Orpheon in 1607. Although the opera had been invented in Florence around 1600s, Monteverdi Orfeo is the first masterpiece in the genre.
Johann Sebastian Bach, a German composer and musician of the Baroque era and the most celebrated member of a large family of North German musicians. His instrumental compositions are known such as Cello Suites and Brandenburg Concertos. Bach's one of the most famous work is the Brandenburg Concertos. His Brandenburg Concertos are a collection of 6 three-movement orchestral works completed by the composer in around 1721 for Prussian Royal, the Margrave Christian Ludwig of Brandenburg-Schwedt. George Frederick Handel, a German-British Baroque composer that's well known for his operas, oratorios, anthems, concerti grossi, and organ concertos. Though Handel is working as a violinist, it was his skill on the organ and harpsichord that began to earn him attention and landed him more opportunities to perform in opera. George Frey Handel's Messiah in 1741 is one of the most famous pieces of choral music in the world. Written during the Baroque era, he composed it for modest vocal and instrumental forces with optional settings for many of the individual numbers. When composing the celebrated Hallelujah Chorus, Handel said it was as if I saw God on his throne and all angels around him.
Neoclassicism derives from the Greek word neos, which means new, and classicus, a Latin word which means first class. Neoclassicism was the name of the ornamental and visual arts trend in the West. It also applied to the classical art and culture of ancient Greece and Rome, which had an influence on literature, theater, music, and architecture. The neoclassical movement took place during the Age of Reason, also known as the Age of Enlightenment. In the 18th century, paintings, sculpture, and architectural works, neoclassical art frequently depicted Roman history and exalted the Roman heroes. Neoclassicism has multiple characteristics. These are portrayal of Roman history, formal composition, the use of diagonals to show the peak of an emotion or moment, local color, overall lighting, and classic geostructure. Here is something to think about neoclassical painting. Neoclassical artists embraced the ideals of order and moderation. Neoclassical painters gave great importance to the costumes, setting, and details of classical subject matter.
Jacques-Louis David. He was an influential French painter in the neoclassical style and considered to be the preeminent painter of the era. His subject of paintings were more on history. Death of Marat. The portrayal of revolutionary martyr This is a painting of the murdered French revolutionary leader Jean-Paul Marat. Napoleon crossing the Alps. The painting showed a strongly idealized view of the real crossing that Napoleon and his army made across the Alps through the Great St. Bernard Pass in May 1800. Jean Auguste Dominique Ingres, born on 1780, died on 1867 in France. Ingres was a pupil of Jacques Louis David. He was influenced by Italian Renaissance painters like Raphael, Nicolas Poussin, Botticelli, and his mentor Jacques Louis David. And his paintings were usually nude portraits and mythological themes. He was regarded as one of the great examples of academic art and one of the finest old masters in his era. Portrait of Napoleon on the Emperor throne. The painting depicts Napoleon in his decent coronation costume, seated upon his golden encrusted throne. The painting was believed to be commissioned by Napoleon as a king of Italy. The painting was owned by the Corps Legislatif, which was a part of the French legislature. The Apotheosis of Homer. The painting was a state commissioned by Charles X to have him remembered in the building work of the Louvre. The painting depicts an image of Homer receiving all the brilliant men of the Rome, Greece, and contemporary times.
Neoclassical sculpture is defined by its symmetry, life-size to monument scale, and its serious subject matter. The subject of neoclassical sculpture range from mythological figures to heroes of the past to major contemporary personages. Neoclassical artist Antonio Canova. Canova was a prolific Italian artist and sculptor who became famous for his marble sculpture that delicately rendered nude flesh. He opened the idea of portraying discrete sexual pleasures by using pure contours with his mythological compositions. Psyche Awakened by Cupid's Kiss, a marble sculpture portraying the relationship of Psyche and Cupid. It represents the god Cupid in the height of love and tenderness, immediately after awakening Psyche with a kiss. Washington, a life-size marble statue of George Washington done in the style of a Roman general. This marble sculpture is currently displayed at North Carolina Museum of History. Next is Bertel Thorvaldsen. Thorvaldsen was the first internationally acclaimed Danish artist. He executed sculptures of mythological and religious themes characters. Christ, a marble sculpture image of resurrected Christ currently located at the Thorvaldsen Museum. Thorvaldsen's sculpture presents a Christ risen from the dead and available to believers in the present moment. Lion of Lucerne, a sculpture of a dying lion in Lucerne, Switzerland, that commemorates the Swiss guards who were massacred in 1792 during the French Revolution.
Neoclassical architecture, characterized by grandeur of scale, simplicity of geometric form, Greek, especially Doric, or Roman detail, dramatic use of columns and reference from blank walls. Neoclassical architecture is an architectural style produced by the neoclassical movement that began in the mid-18th century in Italy and France. It became one of the most prominent architectural styles in the Western world. Andrea Palladio, 1508 to 80, 16th century. One of the giants of Venetian Renaissance architecture of the 16th century. Andrea Palladio based his design on the value of Greek architecture and the tradition of Roman architecture as outlined by Vitruvius. Charles Garnier. He designed the most famous classical block of all, which is the Palais Garnier, or Neo-Baroque Opera House. Now we move on by learning the different types of neoclassical architecture we have here. Temple style, Palladian style, and the lastly classical block style. First is the temple style. Temple style is the Pantheon, which the Pantheon is only by the best preserved ancient Roman monument in the world, but it's also the most copied. Second is La Madeleine. La Madeleine is a Catholic parish church on the place Madeleine in the 18th arrondissement of Paris. It was planned by Louis XV as the focal point of the new Royal, leading to the new place Louis XV, the present place de la Concorde. Now we move on to the Palladian style. Palladian style buildings were based on Andrea Palladio style villa construction. Some of the building feature a balustrade, which is a railing with vertical support along the edge of the roof. First example of Palladian style is the Palladian Bridge, and the second is Chiswick House and Garden. And the last style is Classical Block style. Classical block style, the building features a rectangular or square plan with a flat roof and an exterior rich in classical detail. The exterior features a repeated classical pattern or series of arcs and or column. Example is Sainte Genevieve Library is a public and university library located across the square from the Pantheon, a new reading room from the library with an innovative iron frame supporting the roof.
Romanticism. During the Age of Revolution, there has been a tremendous focus on patriotic and nationalistic movements. The major and central themes of Romanticism movement include the emphasis on the goodness of mankind. Artists also emphasize emotion and feelings of men, which was a deviation from the humanist principle of rationalism. Characteristics of Romanticism shows the height of actions, emotional extremes, celebrated nature as out of control, dramatic composition, heightened sensations, life and death moments. Romanticism paintings. The paintings of Romantic period gave more emphasis on emotion. Artists expressed as much feeling and passion as it could be on a canvas. Artists of Romantic period. First, Jean-Louis Theodore Géricault. The artwork of Géricault is The Wrath of the Medusa, Charging Chaucer. Second, Eugene Delacroix. The artwork of Delacroix is Liberty Leading the People. Third, Francisco Goya. The artwork of Francisco Goya are Saturn devouring his sun and the 3rd of May.
And now, let's move to romantic landscape painting. Romantic landscapes are typically moody in atmosphere. They are more about the subjective feelings of the artist than an objective record of the observable world. Storms, shipwrecks, and mysterious light of dusk and dawn were popular themes. Romantic landscape painters. Theodore Rousseau. Theodore Rousseau was born in April 25, 1812 in Paris, France. He is well known for his unique and unconventional nature-inspired paintings. He was regarded as a forefather and a leader of the Barbizon school of landscape painting. Second is Turner, that is born in April 23, 1775 at Covent Garden, London, United Kingdom. Next is Romantic sculptors. François Rodin, born in January 4, 1784 at Dijon, France. He was a French sculptor, best known for his work on the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, the departure of the volunteers, also known as La Marseillaise. His work frequently depicted patriotic themes as well as the transition from neoclassicism to romanticism. Lau Barrière, born in Paris, France on September 24, 1796. He was a French sculptor working in the Animalier style, best known for his neoclassical bronze statues featuring exotic animals in repose, engaged battle, and in mythological situations.
Realism is the accurate, detailed, unembellished depiction of nature or of contemporary life. It rejects imaginative idealization in favor of a close observation of outward appearance. It is in direct opposition to concerns of the unusual, the basis of Romanticism. The term is also used to describe artworks painted in a realistic, almost photographic way. Realism art style. Realism's purpose is to interpret the actualities of any aspect of life, free from subjective prejudice, idealism, or romantic color. It is in direct opposition to concerns of the unusual, the basis of Romanticism, stresses the real over the fantastic. Examples of realism: Nighthawks by Edward Hopper and Christina's World by Andrew Wyeth. And that sums up our presentation for today. It may be a little long and boring, but we hope that you have learned something from us. Thank you for listening.